Alrighty. What's going on, Can't talk. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Wheeler's Minis and another wonderful episode of Mini Paint and Chill, where I mini paint and you chill to beats as I paint minis, as I said. Before I get started today, though, a few quick things to get out of the way. One, if you aren't already following the channel, please do, if you have the financial ability to, consider subscribing or purchasing something on my website, wheelersminis.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, hi YouTube. Thanks for hanging out and watching these videos. It means the world to me if you could subscribe there. It's free to subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on all my socials at Wheelers Minis on pretty much everything. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't think there's much more what I have to say. So today I'm taking a step away from the Warhammer stuff, although I might work on it still. We'll see. And if you can't guess from the name of the stream, we're going to be working on some cold things. I've got a couple of Winter Wolves printed out, as well as a Frost Giant. I love Frost Giants. They apparently have become one of my favorite monsters. So we're going to work on them today. But yeah, should be relatively straightforward on what I want to do. I'm going to do a kind of like a mid-tone gray and then a dark blue wash over that to get really good colors. Magenta, blue. I thought I had a dark blue. There it is, dark blue. But to start, we're going to go with the middle of the family tree for gray, which I think is ash gray. So we're going to start with ash gray, just get a good base coat on all of it and not get stuff on me. Probably going to need a little bit of that because I got a couple of Winter Wolves. Also, that'll be a very, very prevalent color on the Frost Giant. So the base coat's just kind of going to go all across it. Winter Wolves are very, very white, but I don't want to go straight white and then a dark blue over that because it'll be a little too blue. I want some gray in there to help kind of bring some of that fur aspect in. Honestly, I might use a bigger brush. This one hasn't been working very well recently. So we'll try a size 3. This is just going across pretty much the entirety of the model. And then we'll work from there. Honestly, it probably would have been easier for me to airbrush it on, but I didn't think about that. So we're gonna do a good old brushing. But the dark blue will just give it like a really nice shadow tone to kind of tie into the official art of Winter Wolves, which I love. I think they're a really cool creature. But we kind of just want to get this across the entirety of the model. So that way got a good base tone to go off of. really is the only issue with all these little bits, is sometimes they can get lost when you're trying to paint fully. But so far it's going all right. Some of this. And these models are by Crippled God Foundry. They were part of their December release that I printed out. I just liked some of the stuff that they have. Ironically, a lot of companies are very, very similar in their mindsets for what they're releasing at certain times. So you can pretty much guarantee that around Christmas time or in December, you're going to get something ice themed from anybody who has a My Mini Factory. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you can kind of prepare yourselves for it. Yeah, I'm not being too careful right now because pretty much everything's going to get this color. Hopefully the shadow will kind of bring out some of the textures that you're kind of losing when you put a base coat on. We'll see. This one shouldn't be too difficult of a paint job. We will have to let it dry once we put the wash on it. And even though these little back bits are like icicles, they're still going to get this gray, and I'll work on them differently when we get more to the detail work. But having them have the same kind of shadow as the rest of the model is going to help just kind of bring it all together. Just going over and seeing what I can spot, if anything, that needs color. It's the interior stuff that's just hard to get to with a bigger brush, but my smaller brush is just not working very well. It's kind of on its last legs. So just make sure, like, if you're doing this, just do your best to cover everything. Doesn't necessarily need to be perfect, but it should be at least some semblance of covered. All right, that's a good base to start with. Let that dry for a second, and then I want to look at her. See what I want to do. She got a lot of fun textures on her. Definitely gonna do this in like dragon scale, like white scales. She has a bunch of shields on her and swords. Bones. Very much a pale blue skin tone. So we'll do that. And then for the fur parts, it's definitely more of a, I had a picture up of it, but it's definitely more of like a stuff you would find out in the tundra. So honestly, this would probably be more of like a woolly mammoth cloak, especially with as much fur in one sitting. So we'll probably go with a ruddy. Because initially I was just going to do a gray. We'll do like white accents on it to show that it's like been out in the snow. But initially I was going to do a gray fur cloak, but that's just going to blend in way too much with the rest of the colors. Because there's a lot of grays and blues on her. What I probably will do in a gray or a white fur are the little pieces of like outside her boots or what have you, because I just want to make sure that there's some differentiation of color. So for this, we're starting out with oak brown, which is the lowest of the ruddy brown colors. We'll work our way up from there. We'll probably put some strong tone or what it would be the equivalent of an earth shade on here to really darken it down a little bit. These models are just going kind of sitting on the painting station for a little bit now. I wanted to get some paint on them, especially since I need to restock some stuff in the store. Same thing, just make sure that you're getting color kind of all over where it needs to be, not leaving any blank spots. Maybe what I'll do is take some black brown and get that down to like a wash consistency and put that over this, because that's a nice like deep brown tone. But we'll see once I get to that point. Also because there's a lot of grays and blues on here. This color will look really nice matched with those because brown and blue go really well together. So ends up working out pretty well in the end. Hopefully. Again, right now we're just getting the base coat on, so there you don't need to be, you know, extra careful, but you want to be just making sure that there's a little bit of deftness in there. Give you a nice little warm up before you have to go into the detail too heavily. And like I said earlier, I picked this color because I was trying to, you know, originally I was like, well, what creature would be big enough to have a single piece of fur clothe a giant? And I was like, well, a mammoth, of course. And I mean, that's a pretty common thing for frost giants to hunt. So it just made sense to me. But that's, you know, when I talk about sometimes when I'm painting things where I'm like, let the model talk to you and let you know, like, what its story is, it can help you really narrow down some details on what colors you should be using, because the answer to your question will give you, most often than not, will give you an idea on how you want to paint something. Case in point, what I just said. You know, if you're like, I wonder what this color should be, just think about what the creature is and what it would have around it and what it would have access to, and make your decision from there. I was painting Berner, the Eldritch Foundry model I did this month. You know, he had all of these things on him, and I was just like, okay, well, you know, his backstory that I came up with was his home was beset upon by a dragon, and so specifically a red dragon. So I was like, okay, so his handle for his weapon is going to be obsidian, because that just makes sense, because his name is Berner Blackhandle. But then I just started adding like little details that I thought would fit in with that vibe. You know, the little glowing effect on his axe was orange to almost show off like a burning ember or something like that. A lot of the stuff on his base was, I used weathering powder for the first time and did put a lot of like ash down there, because like the scene that I painted in my head when I was painting him was he has just come back home and was ready to fight the dragon, but you know, obviously there's going to be remnants of the last battle that were there before he was ousted when his home was taken over. So I was like, okay, so there's ashes from, you know, his fallen friends and family that once lived there, stuff like that. You just sometimes gotta like look at a model and be like, how do I paint this? I don't know, but the model's gonna tell me how. Going in with no idea sometimes is not the best, but sometimes if you go in and go, I'm just gonna let the model talk to me, you can really paint something cool, by just looking at the model and getting ideas spurned from all of the stuff that you have to paint. So yeah. All right, so that is cloak done. Before I do anything else on her, I'm going to hit up our winter wolf with this dark blue. Here. What I really want the dark blue to do is just add like a really nice shadow, which it's doing. I don't want it to be too heavy, that's why I put some water in there. But it's going to go on heavy. But once it dries, it should be really just sitting in the recesses nicely. Just got to be careful because gravity will do its thing with paints like these. So you just want to make sure that you're not overdoing it in places so it, you know, pulls up a little too heavily in those spots. You'll learn as you paint what consistency you need and how much paint you need on the brush to make sure that it's, you know, getting the desired result. And it just takes time and practice, and it's something I'm still not, you know, 100% good at. But you only get better by doing things and making mistakes. That's too much paint down there, but I can move it around and I don't need to get more on the brush because I can just move that amount around the model to help get the shadow where I want it to go. A little too much there. I can take it and I can put it elsewhere, and it helps bring the color together really nicely. Right, I'll let that dry. Clean off the brush. Back. And I'm going to start these scales as gray and do the same thing I'm basically doing on the winter wolf, but I might do those a bit more of just a straight up blue tone, because the scales are going to be a little bit less dirty. Well, they're going to be dirty, they're just not going to be as weathered because they're, you know, magical scales that regardless of whether or not they're stuck on the dragon anymore, still have an inherent magic to them, so they're not going to be as weathered as the fur of the winter wolf would be. Get this is where you want to be just a little careful, because you want to make sure that you're not putting too much paint on, because you want that kind of scale texture to come out nicely. And not get covered up by too much paint from the brush or what have you. Really, one of the only reasons I'm using such a large brush right now is because there's just a lot of surface area to cover. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing that in an efficient way, since I am, you know, painting on camera. So this is a size 3 brush. Normally I go with the size 2, but again, because there's such a high surface area that I need to hit, I just want to make sure that I'm hitting everything. I also want to do some cool effects on this too, because she's got that dragon head in her hand. So I just want to like get some bloody gore on that to really accentuate it and just make it look cool. It's on the backside too. I love that. Kind of the same thing. I'm just hitting this up with color. It's going to be covered by shadow, but again, you just want to make sure that the color is where it needs to be. So some of them aren't going to get hit as much, and that's okay. I want to hit the ones that, at least most of them. Well, base coating does tend to be the most boring part of painting. It's good practice for you because it needs to be done. this. What draconic head am I going to do? I know it lends itself to being a white dragon. And initially that's what I was going to do, but I don't think I think I want to do something different. Little horns on it. I might just do light because that's gonna be easiest. Yeah, since I'm probably gonna sell this piece, it's probably best to do that. Alright. White on this too. This is gray, it's not white, but we're gonna get that color on there too because this is gonna be similar to the scales. It's gonna be painted almost identical, but a little different. We'll really start to see this shine when I get the start working on the detail on it. I'll probably work on these again on Thursday. That's why we're using more of this color that I put on there instead of wasting it. So that piece is like sloughed off, so it's gonna get white on here, or gray here. Not fully on it. I think this is the issue. I have to be in that creative mood because so often I get down and I'm like, all right, I want to paint, but I don't actually want to paint. I want to get like detail work done. I don't want to have to go through the, the steps of getting the base coat down and things like that. But that unfortunately is a very important part in painting. getting color on that start. Cool. I gotta figure out some of the so the skin I want to do a pale blue, but honestly keep using this color. I think I'm gonna do all the little extraneous bits of fur around here in the gray as well, but instead of hitting them up with a blue tone, I'm gonna hit them up with a like a fur contrast paint, and hopefully what that'll do is give me the desired effect, but who knows. And those rivets on the armband, so we're going to do that in leather, but the rivets will go on last, and I'll do those in like a steel. What I would like for this is once I put that Ready Fur on there, the speed paint, which basically is a contrast paint, hopefully it'll keep some of that gray there, but it will bring out some of the fur color to almost look like something that would naturally be like in the tundra or where you would find a frost giant. The only thing that I'm worried about is that when I put that contrast paint on there, that it'll bleed onto the other parts that are painted like this, so like the scales and stuff, but I can always clean that up. Again, right now we're just kind of base coating, so it's not imperative to be super clean. It's just imperative to make sure that you're getting paint everywhere that you need it. So it's got a solid holding ground. We get into the detail, we'll actually start making sure that color doesn't go where it shouldn't be. beauty. And sometimes the annoyance of base coating is just how messy it is, because you'll start doing it and you'll be like, man, I really don't vibe with this model. And I've already done that today where I'm just like, I don't like the way that this looks. And I have to remember that this is not how it's going to look. It is going to look completely different once it is done. It's going to look fantastic once it's done. So like I've said before, don't judge your model at 25% or anything less than that. And paint stuff that excites you. The more you paint what excites you, the less you'll get burnt out in the hobby. That's something that I've struggled with before, where I was like, man, what do people want to see painted? And I was like, it does matter sometimes. And when I have like the creative flow where I'm just like, yeah, I don't need that kind of, I don't feel burnt out. I actually am excited about painting. I'll ask people what they want to see painted, but any other time, if I'm starting to feel burnt out, I just go for something that I want to paint. And sometimes, more often than not, that is giants, because they're fun to paint, one, and they're usually very easy to paint because they're such large models. But also I just love giants. I think they're cool. The advice I got though when I was starting to get burnt out on things was like, paint something, especially like sometimes you'll be painting and it just doesn't feel like the paint's going on right and the model's just not working, the paint's not hitting the palette correctly, and you'll try to find all these excuses to be like, well, I just don't understand, like it's this or this. And I've had those moments before, but I asked, and one of the best pieces of advice I got was to be like, just paint something fun, paint something funny. You know, it doesn't have to be a serious model. It can just be something that like you saw and you were like, man, that makes me laugh. To kind of find that enjoyment again. And again, that all just kind of leads back to the idea of like, you need to paint what excites you and what is interesting to you, so that you don't get burnt out. All right, we're almost done with all the gray. At least this gray. Oh. Hopefully not too much on this one. At least on the top part that I can see. looking back through, seeing if I missed anything. Which inevitably I will, because I miss things a lot. Especially on the base coat. Everything. I think he's trying to figure out this. I think this is also scale, so I'm also gonna adjust this part. So we're just gonna do up to here. I think she's gonna look pretty cool. All said and done. I might work on her in the interim, like off stream, just to get her to a better spot, because base coating, I think that's the thing that I need to do, is just like have a bunch of stuff that's base coated for stream. That way you guys don't have to watch me go through just each of these models. Like every once in a while it's okay, but like having you guys have to watch me go through base coating, you know, models like this where it's just going to take a lot of time to do it is just not great content. So moving forward, I'll probably just have a few things base coated and ready. That way we can have more fun doing the painting, the actual, you know, thing that this stream is known for. All right. So what I do want to do is get the skin painted. And I think I'm going to go with a pale blue motif. Vivid. Pale. Also vivid. And pale. Pale. It's purple. We're gonna start at, haha, ironic. We're gonna start at ultramarine blue. Isn't that funny? And this is just gonna be a good shadow tone for us. If it's open and working. But these are the strong pale. Okay, or not. Must be something stuck in there. So what we'll do is there we go. Some blue on there. I laugh because it's ironic because I don't paint Warhammer models and I've never painted a Space Marine. So It's just funny that this is the color that we're starting with for the skin tone. It's a good starting point though. Like they have giants have, especially frost giants, have very like pale blue toned skin. That's what we're going with. It's a gorgeous color. And I know that ultramarine blue has been around longer than 40K has, because it's been a color for a long time. But I know that it is most often used with your good old Space Marines. This is why you paint in out first. You don't get overbrushing on stuff you've already done. Again, this is fine because I'm gonna be coming back over it. Like the paint. So, not too worried. Also, if we want to get a more desaturated look, which I probably will once we move up, we can always add some gray to the blue, or add some of the blue-gray family into this. It doesn't have a lot showing. Does on the interior though. And a lot of this won't be seen, and that's okay. I got in a bad habit of not painting everything, and I started to look at it and be like, I don't like the way that looks, because there's just a whole piece of the model that's unpainted. Even though the painted piece looks good, the unpainted piece kind of detracts from the paint. So I'm trying to be better at actually painting everything that needs to be painted. Including the pieces that probably won't ever see the light of day. But if I'm going to sell pieces like this, I want to make sure that it is my best work and everything gets covered. So that is what we're doing. Very rarely will someone take a model that's painted and turn it upside down and be like, no, you didn't paint this piece that only I can see now because I've turned it upside down. But important to me to have you know that I put forth an effort into it. Because I know some painters who, like, they'll paint the front, or they'll paint, you know, really pretty lighting, but only paint a third of the model. And the model's gorgeous, but it's also missing a big chunk of it, so. Those things where it's like having siblings is like, and it's like you go into the fridge and you're like, oh man, there's a whole cake in there, and then you open the thing and it's just like the icing and the whole thing's been hollowed out because your sibling ate the whole cake and just left it to make it look like there was more left. That's how I feel sometimes if I don't paint a mini fully. Honestly, I probably should have waited to paint the cloak because I'm going to be touching the model a lot, which I want to start wearing gloves more. Because the oils on your hands can tend to lift the acrylics off the model. She's blue, dabba dee dabba die. Let her dry for a second, and then we'll get to her leather bits. But for now, we're gonna go back to this lovely, lovely guy. Let's go back to this. Just putting little brush strokes on there to kind of bring back that fur color. It's very gray. I almost wish it was a little bit more blue. So maybe for the... I might just do a straight blue instead of dark blue because it just doesn't show up as well. So, it's not everything down. Not coming off the way I want it to. We're going to work our way up to white on this. Honestly, the gray is not a bad thing though, because I don't want it to be too crazy with its color. And save the craziness for a different one. But For the fur here, it's already got good texture on it, but just doing like thin little lines can help bring another level of texture to the model. It really just depends on how much time you want to spend on it. Because some people do extremely tiny little lines to help bring forth that kind of fur texture on a model that they're painting. And you 100% can do that if you want. Something that I've wanted to do for a while, so I'm gonna try it just a little bit more. It takes, obviously it takes longer to paint something, but the end result tends to be worth it. You just want to make sure that your paint's thinned down enough to where it's coming off the brush nicely and nice thin lines, helping you really accentuate again that kind of fur look. And because this is the coat just like right after the wash, you don't have to focus on specific highlights. You can just kind of bring the whole model back up. And then as you are kind of working your way up for highlights, what you'll do is just be more selective about where you're placing the color. Again, luckily, you have really good sculpts. You don't need to necessarily add this detail in with the brush. And you can just, if you want to do it quickly, you can just dry brush pretty much everything if you really wanted to. But again, because I'm trying something new, I just want to see how it looks if I just paint in that detail myself. By adding in those kind of small lines like I've been talking about. And so far I kind of like it. Again, it definitely is more work on your part as a painter, but most of the time I would say that the more time you spend on the model, the better it's going to look. Not true for every model, but I would say a good 80% of the time that's the case. We're not, again, in order to make sure that we're getting a good consistent look, we're not worrying about highlights right now. We're just kind of bringing that color back and those small lines. And then as we work up, we're going to have more highlight. Geez, already that much time. Alright, so we've got about 43 minutes left. Might be able to get something like this done. I gotta think though. How do I want to do this? Because I think like a grayish blue. This, a little bit of that. All right, and then this is gonna go on. Yeah, I like that. This is gonna go on the spikes that are ice, so it's just kind of a mix of the ash gray and the ultramarine blue that we used on the frost giant, until you get the desired look that you're going for. So in this case, this is the desired look I'm going for. And this is the fun thing too, as you kind of move up the grays, you can add that gray with the same blue and start to get your highlight tones for the ice as well. The fun thing about ice though is it doesn't really have highlights per se. It just kind of has the specular highlights, which means that it has a really nice, pretty reflection of its light source. So even if I just did this color, one more color, and then white, I think it'll look fine. Just want to make sure I'm getting this color on there so we've got a good differentiation between the colors and the tones. And that's the thing too, is like when you're painting, especially something like this where it lends itself to being similar tone, having that kind of base undertone have a mixture of colors that you're already using on the model will kind of just help the model solidify as one cohesive piece more. So for instance, like obviously ash gray is what I based most of this with, so that's what I mixed with the blue. So there's going to be cohesion already in the model off of the fact that this color, while not specifically is present anywhere else besides these ice spikes, the undertone of it being that ash gray is present on the model itself. So it should, in theory, look good together. Not always the case, but I would, again, say probably a good 90% of the time it is. And I'll have to remember this because I do have another winter wolf over there that needs painting, and I would love to paint them similarly. Also, DM brain working a little bit here. If ever you have an encounter and you want to add some fun stuff to your game, and specifically it has like a frost giant in it, giving them a companion that's a winter wolf is a great way to add another creature there. As long as you feel that your party has the proper tools to handle the situation, i.e., enough people. I DM a group of 7, so I am constantly having to change things around to make sure that they are balanced in more of my favor, since there are 7 people, because the monster manual and a lot of the extra resources that we have aren't really made for 7 people at a table. And if you want a good reference for 7 people at a table, go watch Critical Role. Give you a good idea about where hit points need to be and what abilities need to be there. Generally speaking, you're going to want to beef up your hit points, but also generally speaking, you're going to want to beef up your hits. Balancing those two is imperative for larger tables because it ensures that it doesn't feel cheap at the end and it doesn't feel easy. Which makes your players feel like what they did was worthwhile. I'm having trouble getting my resin prints to clean properly, so I've started using a hairdryer to see if that would help. But it just ends up bending the model a little bit, which is not fun. Especially when you have parts like this where they don't necessarily need to be bent. But I don't know if it's just because it's really cold out right now, but a lot of that resinous material is sticking to the IPA, and even though it goes through the cycle, I've been trying to cycle them multiple times, they still are left sticky with like pieces of uncured. Even after I cure it, they're just like uncured sections of just really intense resin mixed with IPA. That's been really annoying. But I'll figure it out. Maybe when it warms up, things will change. And if it does, then I'll know that that's the problem. Yeah, so we got a nice little blue toned. Ice now. Sweet. Looking pretty good so far. All right. So now we'll just start moving up our gray. Let's see where we get to with that. We got 33 minutes left. Yeah, we'll work on this guy and then maybe work some more on her when we get there. When we finish this guy. Now we're just going to start being a little bit more selective with where we put these little lines. Moving up closer to where the light's going to catch them a bit more. And again, the beautiful thing about models like this is a lot of that texture is already there. And when you're adding in some of that texture on your own, all it is accentuating the other textures. So it ends up looking way more textured than it actually is, which is exactly what I'm working for. Our main color, once we get to it, at least in our main highlights, will be that more of a just pure white. Tiny little spots. And more working towards where the light is actually hitting now. So as we move up, we'll start to see more of it in those places. And it does help when your paint's thinned down enough, because it tends to be a little hard to make those lines when the paint's a little too thick. You'll find a good consistency where it's not so watery that it, starts to just bleed all over the place, but it's, not too thick to where it won't go off the brush. And I will say it is a little bit harder to do when you're in a drier climate, but do your best to work with what you've got. I have, it's not on right now because I'm done, but I have a humidifier in here that I will use if I'm working on a long project, just to ensure that the humidity down here stays at a reasonable level, which honestly I should probably turn on. And we're just getting thin lines as best we can. Help really accentuate that fur. Focusing more on places where the light's touching a little bit more, especially as we move higher and higher on the colors, just to ensure that we are accenting the right spaces. If it hits it too much, it's not the end of the world, you know. Just, you know, look at it through your eyes and see if it's something you want to go back and fix. And if you think that it looks fine, you can just leave it and move on. But it also never hurts to have a secondary pair of eyes. That's why specifically with anything that I am going to sell or a commission piece, I have my wife look at it before I make a final decision. That way I know someone else's eye is on it. So far it's looking pretty good. I'm really happy with how it's turned out thus far. Those little fur scratches on there. Whew. Sometimes your eyes get really, really tired when you are just looking at the same thing over and over again, but also a part of painting. But I also would recommend just, every once in a while giving yourself a little bit of a break. Especially the longer that you're painting, you just want to make sure that you're taking the necessary time to give yourself a break, and your eyes for that matter. Just making sure that you're not overworking them, and that can do a couple of things. One, if you're having trouble trying to figure out what's wrong with the model when you're looking at it and you're like something's up, taking a break can give you a moment to just kind of like relax, step away from the model, and then come back to it with a fresh set of eyes. So always benefits to taking a rest. It'll also be fun to have this painted up and compare it to the last time I painted a winter wolf, which was, geez, forever ago. Just to see how much I've grown and if anything has changed in my painting habits. I know for certain there's one thing that hasn't changed too much, and that's the way that I paint things. A little bit of this. It's just a little bit brighter than the color before it. Same kind of thing. We're not going to paint the whole thing. We're just going to kind of find some good edges to catch. And then when this gets finished, what I'll probably do, not even probably, what I will do is go back over the ice parts with a gloss to really kind of give them that sheen that they are due from being ice. And we will have to work on the mouth at some point. Right. And keep moving up. Yet again, just making sure that we are hitting less and less space. These little thin lines to start to accentuate the highlight a little bit more. Focusing on the highest points closest to the light source, which in this case would be the sun or the moon, just depending on what time of night or day, I should say. This lovely creature is out. Again, the goal is to make sure that you're hitting less space than you were before, so as each layer of highlight goes up, you should be doing it quicker and quicker, but being more focused on where it's going. And just go back and fix up any areas until you get your desired result. I'm thinking he's looking pretty good. Same thing, a little bit of blue. There's a decent chunk of the same thing with this, just hitting less and less. This is the issue too. Sometimes you go through and you realize that there's not enough highlight on it for where it's at on the model and where your light source is. You just have to go back through and kind of fix it a little bit. Again, this is all something that, you know, takes time to understand how light works and how it, you know, reflects and refracts off of certain pieces of material and things of that sort. So, you know, you'll learn through doing and through seeing and through really getting a grasp on exactly what it is that you're painting. It just takes time. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. Ooh. See if we can do this. Finish up at least the model itself. So now we're gonna just take some straight old titanium white. And even smaller than before, just start putting in very tiny textures in the highest detail places. And this is definitely where you're going to want to be just a little bit more careful with your brush to make sure that you're getting very thin lines and not globbing anything on. Because this is where everything kind of comes together. So having a good grasp on the model, also just making sure that your paint's thinned how you want it. Doing those thin lines to help evoke that idea of fur still, and just lightly. And this is going to be even more sparse. It's going to catch the, you know, highest areas, but you're going to have that stray strand or two that's going to, you're not going to think that it's going to be in an area where highlights happen, but it is. And so, especially with a texture like this, you just want to make sure that the color's there. beautiful thing about snow too is it's often presented to us as white, but it actually has very gray, a very gray look to it at times. So it fits very well in with the theme of this creature. Have to double check to see what color the nose is. Make sure I'm doing that right. But now good color on there. We're a little past 5, and that's okay because I'm pretty much done. A few small things I want to hit up. There we go. All right. So that's what we'll leave it today. Pick back up on Thursday with this guy and that frost giant that I worked on. Thanks so much for hanging out. I appreciate it. If you aren't already following the channel, please do. If you have the financial ability to, consider subscribing or buying something off my website, of which these models will be available once they're done. Other than that, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe there. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. I will see you on Thursday, and that is it. All right, have a great night, guys. Bye.